Do you need to be a musician to be a good producer, mix engineer, and or mastering engineer? That's what we're going to be discussing on the Working Audio Tools podcast today. Hello, my name is Ed Thorne. I play drums. I don't produce, except my own stuff, but I mix and master, and I do live sound. And Paul Third is up there in Scotland, and he is doing a lot of production at the moment, and a lot of playing, and a lot of recording, hence the conversation today. So, Paul, what are your thoughts on this? Because this is obviously a broad, multifaceted question. But let's start with mixing. Do you need to be a musician to be a good mix engineer?
No, you don't need to be, but it helps. And I think that that's something that I've been thinking about a lot recently. You know, obviously me being a guitarist, right, I understand what a guitar should sound like. So, you know, when I get a lot of band stuff, I know, right, okay, this is roughly how, like, guitar should sound in indie or sound in a rock song and a metal song or a pop song. So when I listen, to songs, I'm always listening to the guitars because I'm a guitarist. And it's the same, when I speak to Ed about songs. Ed will a lot of the times talk about the feel and the groove and the drums, and he'll know which drummer, played on that record or this record or that record. And I think it helps. It's not essential for being a mix and mastering engineer, but I'd argue that to be a good recording engineer and a good producer, I would argue that you do have to be a pretty decent musician, because even if we think about, like, on Saturday, so I had a session, acoustic guitar, vocals, very good guitar player and an unbelievable singer. And obviously, me being a guitarist and, miking up acoustic guitars, I was able to come up with a technique that worked really well because I know how an acoustic guitar should sound like in a room from the perspective of a player and, other people listening to you playing. So I came up with a technique that actually worked that well in the first song that we did that Levi wanted me to do it again. So it was an Austrian Audio OC818 dual capsule, so in stereo, very, very close, kind of pointed near like the 12th fret, kind of in the middle of the guitar. Then I had an over-the-shoulder mic, which not many people do, and it was a JZ V12. And I had that over-the-shoulder, and I had it a lot closer, because she's a very, very delicate player. And then I had the OC818 running through the Grandchild, which is the 500 series Heritage Audio Fairchild compressor. And I had that in stereo on the OC818, and I was managing the gain to try and get the right compression, because we did a few takes and I was like, that's not how an acoustic guitar should sound, because it was sounding overly choked. And obviously you need an acoustic guitar to sound like it's got, it breathes. You know what I mean? If you think about when
if you do that stereo guitar thing, you've got the danger of the low end triggering the compression more than the top end. So were you adjusting the preamps accordingly to balance that out, going through a stereo compressor?
Yeah, it was quite difficult, because I was looking at left and right and I was like, oh my God, I couldn't get it right. And then I finally got them both, both levels coming out. And then obviously that made the left and right very balanced, but it didn't sound overly compressed, because the way I have that Fairchild set, it just sounds really, really transparent. And the over-the-shoulder, what was great about the over-the-shoulder was I had it kind of pointed about here. So it's picking up the low end, but obviously it's not pointed anywhere near the sound hole. Neither of them are, because the dual capsule's like this in front of the guitar, and over the shoulder's here.
Over the shoulder as in over the neck side or the body side?
Over the body side, yeah. So she was playing like this and it's coming across like this. And I had them quite close, but what the over the shoulder mic done was it gave me the low end that I was missing from, obviously if you think about it, you've got an OC818 and a dual capsule. It's picking up left and right, but it's not really picking up much low end, because it's completely missing the sound hole. But when it comes to acoustic guitars, many people do this thing where they'll just pop up, one mic in front of it. And it does work on, tons and tons of recordings where, again, if you have the mic pointed far enough away the sound hole, then again, you kind of miss a lot of the boominess. But the boominess is always there when I do like a single mic. And I just find that way I get a really good stereo image, and I get the low end that I'm looking for, and I pick up a little bit more of the room. And many people would say, but the phase, it's like you're messing with the phase with over the shoulder mic. But it works, it adds depth, and if it sounds good, it sounds good. And whenever, Levi does a song with me, I have to use that technique. And it sounded amazing, to the point where, I'm not really allowed to touch it that much. A bit of EQ, compression-wise, I engineered my ass off on the weekend.
Yeah, well, that's a great engineering result. Do you not find the V12 too bright? I find it unusably bright.
Well, I think because obviously it works really well as over the shoulder because it's not pointed directly at the guitar. So what it does is
from the fretboard.
Correct. So I find it a very realistic sounding mic where it's got a lot of depth and a lot of it almost feels like it picks up more of the room than any other condenser that I've got. Yeah, its natural sound quality is quite bright, but as an over the shoulder, I think it just works perfect. But I think, a big part of me achieving that sound was being a guitarist. And so when I was, hearing it back, I was like, yeah, does it still sound like a guitar in a room? Let's bring the over shoulder. Let's bring things closer. And because she was playing more delicately, I understood, right, I need to bring the mics even closer because, again, you've got signal to noise ratio. So, again, I was bringing it very close and it was very intimate. And, it's one of the best acoustic guitar recordings I've ever achieved. But it's only because I know how a guitar should sound. And, drums took me ages and ages. And I had to learn from Ed. And I still learn from Ed because I'm still
figuring it out.
But I still say to this day that genuinely, if you give me, 10 tracks, Ed will most likely mix the drums better like 7 times out of 10 because he understands things that I don't, right? So I can technically, I can get, the bass to sound right, kick to sound right, get the right snare sample, make sure they're all time aligned and, make sure that, again, that even that they're at the right pitch for the song. Maybe the snare's not the right pitch if you add in a sample, what Ed taught me. There's certain things that technically I can get right. But as we've had it on the podcast and the comparisons, Ed just has a drummer's touch where he just knows, right, the groove, the feel, the emotive parts of it. And it could just be, adding in a bit of saturation where it's needed because as a drummer, that should sound a certain way. The artist said, they're influenced by this, that, and that. And to get that, you're a drummer, right? A guitarist knows what a guitar sounds like, and a drummer knows what a drum kit should sound like. A bassist knows how a bass line should play. You know what I mean? It's massive, in my opinion.
Yeah, I mean, I would caveat that with saying not every musician knows how to get a good sound. Trust me.
True. Yeah, very true.
I've done so many live gigs, and drummers have turned up with a battered kit, and it sounded amazing. Other drummers have turned up with a brand new spanking kit, and they can't tune it for shit. So it's hit and miss. But I think what you're getting at with your story about the studio is your knowledge of being a guitar player and your experience. And I think that's it. Like when you refer to me knowing what to do with drums, I don't think about it. I'm literally going by
second nature,
feel, an ear. And you'll be the same with guitars, just as I've learned things off you with guitars. And in the comparisons, traditionally you've had the guitar sounding better, which just makes sense. We're leaning towards our instruments. But it sounds like because you're a musician and a mix engineer, you've then been able to engineer that session really well, which will then help you as a mix engineer. So that's, like I've always said on this podcast, the more you know about different facets of the job, the job before you, the job after you, the better you can do your job. And that can go a step either side. If we're if you're a recording engineer, you need to know how to play a guitar. Like if I went in a studio and someone was talking about humbucker pickups, I'm like, no, I have no clue. I'm not the guy to speak to, but I can put a mic in front of an amp and make it sound good. I think being a musician massively helps because that sensibility lends you towards a sensitivity, especially if you've performed and you've performed with other people and you understand how instruments react. Like if you've rehearsed with bands, even if you've never gigged, even if you've just rehearsed with bands in a room, you understand how things resonate together. What harmonics are produced, whether you're consciously thinking, oh, well, when he hits that bass note, my floor tom rings, or when he hits that guitar note, my snare drum buzzes. You might not be thinking the physics of it, which we might do as mix engineers, but you're aware of it and you're absorbing it and you're understanding that that's how things should sound. Just as leaving hi-hats in a track. I remember the days when you used to delete hi-hat mics and we had to have a chat about that. And, it was just something, an arm of experience you maybe didn't have, but now you do.
Yeah, totally.
Now, there are going to be exceptions to this, and the obvious exception is Rick Rubin, who apparently doesn't play and apparently doesn't know frequencies. I think he's in a minority, especially being that successful, not knowing anything about music. In terms of production, it can go two ways. I've worked with producers who are phenomenal musicians and they just overplay. They put far too much on because they can't simplify things. They're not capable of doing it, especially jazz musicians trying to do pop or fusion musicians. They can't simplify stuff. It's just not in their nature. That's fine. There's a scene for that. But as a producer, it's about discipline, I think. So do you want the exceptional awareness of everything to be able to pick and choose? Or do you just want a little bit of an awareness that can take you a long way? I think the best producers at least know their way around a keyboard to be able to work out harmony with singers. Okay, well, over this chord, you're singing a fourth and that doesn't quite work. Or actually, your ear's going to the minor third, but it's a major third, or, dominant seventh or whatever. But you get the point. How much awareness, how much knowledge is dangerous and how much knowledge is useful? And there's often a fine balance.
Absolutely. And I think, Rick's a very good example, because the reason that many people get Rick Rubin in is because he has no, when I say musicality, that's wrong. His musicality comes from emotion and feel. And he always talks about how songs make him feel, how the performance makes him feel, how the lyrics make him feel.
And macro objectivity, rather than if you're an expert, you'll be on micro objectivity.
Correct. And I think, what that shows to people like me, and we were talking about this before we came on, and again with Jeremy last week on the podcast, where we were talking about collaboration and session musicians and why it's very important if you don't have, any musicality in terms of, playing an instrument, then it's quite important to surround yourself with people that do. So for example, right, if I am ever in a pickle with drums, I'll go to Ed. If I'm in a pickle in regards to, I need, somebody that could play very quickly, to a click in like one take, can play the same things I can play, but just can get it done quick. And as a performer, just as very efficient. Then again, I've got Billy Mitchell, who I've been working with locally. I was saying this to Ed, where we were working on a session with a Scottish artist, writing the song from scratch, is what I'm doing just now. And, they had the song done. So I was doing one session with one artist in here, and I got them in the live room to get the song done and then come in with me. And it was funny because the two of us worked together, where they came in and they forgot the song. They forgot to record it, or it got deleted. And I remember coming in and hearing it. And I remember the chorus, and I said to Billy, it started with a major seventh. I was 100% it was a major seventh. And it was that one thing when he went, it was that. And that, me just saying to him, it was a major seventh, knowing what the chord was, then got him on. And then I remember I was like, right, we got the click, we got the tempo, one take, that was it. Got Christy in the booth, and then we worked on it from there. And I was sitting back going, wow, like, Billy, you're playing every single day. He's a session guitarist for, Cal Faulkner from The View and stuff like that. And it's funny how technically, me and Billy could play the same things, but he is so good at what he does, and he's quick. Where, what might take me 3-4 takes to get it absolutely perfect the way I want it, he can get it in one take. And again, we were talking about, session musicians with Jeremy last week, and me and you were talking about the importance of session musicians. And I think, the people out there that have made a career without any, musicality, I think what's quite evident from what I've seen, and when I've spoken to people who don't play instruments, is that they still surround themselves with people who are instrumentalists. You know what I mean? So for example, if we think about even the Beatles, George Martin, was the engineer, but he was doing all the scores. He was creating, a lot of the piano parts. He was creating all of the string parts for a lot of the Beatles stuff. And it was kind of him that taught Lennon, well, not Lennon, but McCartney, because McCartney was getting into, scoring a lot of the strings and stuff like that. And for the Beatles, a big part of the Beatles sound was George Martin. That's why they said he was a fifth Beatle. But you don't need to be, a string player. If we take Joe Carroll as a very good example, Joe in Nashville is constantly working on string scores. He's seems to be one of the guys that, many people go to, but he's got the experience where I don't know if he could play a fiddle or he could play a violin or whatever, but he's done so many sessions. He understands what a violin should sound like, what a cello should sound like, what a string quartet should sound like, what a whole string section should sound like, the workflow behind it, the miking technique, the gain staging, like what mics to use, blah, 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 blah. You can teach yourself how to engineer 100%, but it normally comes from people who have had the experience of doing it, or again, are instrumentalists themselves. So I would say that it's quite rare to find somebody out there that's successful that has no circle of people around them that are musicians, or don't get them in on sessions to work on songs with them. Because I always take the thing from Steve Jobs a lot, where Steve Jobs always kind of said, always surround yourself with people that are smarter than you. You know what I mean? Never, ensure that you're never the smartest person in the room. And I always see that with music, where I'm even thinking about building a production house. Me, Billy, and we.
Is that why you hang out with me so much?
Probably because you are like another, a bow to my armory, because you offer me something that I'm so far detached from drums. I have no. We all know I fucking hate drums, but I have Ed there, who, if I'm ever in a pickle, even when we think about the drum kit in there. Like, I recently had to buy my own snare, my own hats, because Gav, who's got the kit in there, he's touring with like quite a big metal band now. Like, they were in the 80s and they've made a resurgence, and he's the main drummer for them. So he's had to take some of his stuff away. So I was like to Ed, right, if people's going to record in here, I can't really rely on Gav's like snare and hi-hats. So then I had to go to Ed. I was like, right, is this a good hat? And even straight away, I was like, oh my God, this is so boring. Ed was like, no, you can't. What was it you said to me? It has to be B20 or something. Like, you were talking about the type of steel that the hats are, and that's a shit one.
Fuck me.
Oh, what? Fuck knows.
It's definitely not a steel. Yeah, I mean, that was an interesting one, because that was where your tight-ass fucking budget wannabe fucking closed wallet was meeting my expensive taste.
Yeah, totally.
With a vast knowledge of everything about drums. And you weren't too happy with my suggestions. DistroKid sponsors the Working Audio Tools podcast, and 30% off your first year subscription can be found in the podcast show notes and the YouTube video description. Hyperfollow is the easiest way to place all of your content in one single place, making finding all of your content super easy for your audience. Upload artwork for your release, edit the information, and apply links to all of the streaming platforms your music is going to be available, which of course on DistroKid is potentially all of them that exist now and even in the future. Add social media buttons so your audience can find you and your latest music video. Creating a beautiful landing page with a preview of your music is easy with Hyperfollow. Hyperfollow links can be created for all of your releases, and it enables you to create pre-save links for your audience to pre-order your music before it's released. This link is shareable on all of your platforms and a great way to promote your next release, only with DistroKid. I think we found some good results in the end.
We got Zildjian ones, and I got them for 130 quid. And it was funny where I got, because there's a Yamaha Stage Custom in there, that's Gav's kit. When I asked him, I was like, right, what snare should I get? And you had said, just get the Yamaha Stage Custom snare. That's actually quite a decent snare. Went on Thomann, it was like 115 quid or something. And then Gav came in, tuned it up for me, and he was like, right, 'cause I'm obviously shit, I wouldn't even attempt to tune a drum kit. I could teach myself how to do it, but it was like, right, 5 minutes and you had the whole thing tuned. And he came out and he was like, oh, Paul, I've got the Stage Custom snare. He went, oh, that sounds better than my one. And I was like, result, get in.
So it will do because it's brand new.
Yeah.
They're cheap because it won't sound that good all the time, but it will sound good for what you're going to do it for. Yeah. And also, most people are going to sample the snare drum anyway.
Correct.
And the drummers are likely to bring their own snares, likely to tune things their own way. So, no, I'd say, I mean, I had a Yamaha, I gigged with the Yamaha Stage Custom for years. They're brilliant kits.
Yeah, and I think that's why it's important to surround yourself with people who know more than you. So instead of me trying to be a superstar and be like, no, I'm going to do everything myself with drums.
You can't do
exactly.
it. You have to delegate some stuff. I don't claim to be a producer. I am a recording engineer because I've done so much recording for YouTube over the years and my own stuff. And I produce my own stuff, but that's easy. I don't ever want to claim to be a producer for someone else because I don't feel like I have the keyboard skills and the harmony awareness or the ear training. You know, if someone plays me a chord, I don't know what it is.
Yeah,
unless it's like C major. I can, I can pick out, if someone plays a chord, I can pick out the harmony, third and fifths and fifth below and all that. That's fine because I've done a lot of backing vocals on my own stuff as well. But what I've done, and I think this is partly a producer's role, is not just being a musician, but understanding that who you get around you is the production. A great producer will say, yeah, we're going to get that player in, and that player in. And that combination of ingredients is going to make the recording what it is. The producer might never say to any of the people, many of the musicians what to play. And that's fine. Like Jeremy, he gets his session guys in. I don't think he's telling them what to play very much.
Yeah, I agree.
But he is producing that record, getting the right people in who are doing the right job. And that is part of the production.
Yeah, and I mean, for me, producing these tracks, it's difficult because we're starting songs from scratch, and I'm acting as their vessel, to write the songs. So, like, for me, if I either wasn't, a piano player or a guitar player, I would really, really, really struggle to write a song with them because you need to start from somewhere. I've wrote 2 songs now where, the artist doesn't play a musical instrument. So they've got like an idea and like a melody, and then I've got to then find the right chord. First I've got to figure out what key are you in, and then find the right key, right, okay, and then find the right chords to go with that, then develop a chord structure to go with that. And like without that musicality, I wouldn't be able to write the songs with them, because how do you start a song without a musical instrument? You need something. Again, you could get beat. So, for example, I've got this other song that on Friday I was working with Amy Ferguson, and she wanted kind of a Tate McRae style song, and I was like, shit, there's going to be no guitars on this whatsoever. So what did I do? I was like, right, let's just get a beat, and I'm not a beat maker. And I was like, right, okay, instead of saying, oh, know what I'll do? I'll see if I can get in touch with a beat maker, and then we'll come back and we'll do it. I was like, oh, fuck it. It's like, right, let's listen to lots of songs that you like on Spotify. Bum. Right, okay, I've got an idea. Let's get a kick, let's get a snare, right? Let's just get a beat. And I was just like, filmed the tempo, got her to sing. It's like, right, okay, is that going to be the rough timing that you think is going to be right? Got the click. Right, okay, that's going to be the BPM for the track. That's what's comfortable for you to sing along to it. Right, let's get a beat to work with that. Just fucking to the grid. Just got a kick pattern, got a snare. And then we just played about with kick and snare sims till we got one that sounded good. And then it probably took us about an hour and a half till we had the full song, completely gridded out exactly where it needed to be. And, and I didn't need to be a there was no musical instruments going on there. I was genuinely just going like to a grid, get the fucking BPM right. But to move the song forward, I'm going to need to add chords to it. All these Tate McRae stuff, they still have synth parts in it. They've still got chords to work with, the melody. So it is really, really, really important if you want to be a producer that you've got to, I think, mate, you've got to play something. I don't think in the modern day world you're going to get away as a producer just being a beat maker. Like, you need to play something.
Yeah, I
think
there's 2 sides to that, because I think what you're talking about is very common, where singers don't have any musical awareness.
Yeah.
They just sing. And as someone who went to uni and lived with singers for many years, I find that fascinating, because they were all trained on the piano, and some of them were amazing.
There is a lot. Yeah, there is a lot.
Yeah, amazing piano players. So if you're producing somebody who has no musical theory, yes, you have to do something, because if you play a chord and they don't know what they're singing over it, you've got to say, actually, that note doesn't work. Try this note, try that note. Oh, hang on, that moves away from the melody. If you fixed on that, we're actually in a different key, or we need to change the chord. Versus someone like Rick Rubin, who is obviously working with some of the world's most proficient musicians. He doesn't need to know theory. That's their job.
The Red Hot Chili Peppers, for example, like Rick's just sitting. I remember I watched the documentary, and he's just sitting there, listening, going, right, okay, so what you've got just now? He'll be like, yeah, I'm not feeling it. Yeah, I quite like what you did there. He can't even put his finger on it. He can't say to you, that's that chord, or that's dissonant or whatever. He's just like, yeah, I really liked what you did there. And I think his ear and his taste is something that is proven to many people, that if you have a very good ear and a very good taste, then you can go, pretty far. But, to be in the modern day world, when you're expected to do everything, it's very difficult. And, that's why I'm working a lot more with Billy, where, we're kind of going through sessions where I'm getting to a certain point where I'm like, right, this is as much as I've got time for. I'll just send it to him and he'll be like, he loves it all. He's like, right, play a bit on the synth and the piano, a few guitar lines, add a bit of bass to it, all in time, perfectly recorded. Send it across to me. Yeah, okay, that sounds good. I then bring it back to the client, and then it's like them will play with it. You know what I mean? And it's good to have somebody that I could just go to when I'm struggling for time, or again, if I'm struggling, full stop. I think it's okay to admit that you're not a superstar, and I think as an artist, what I've noticed is that they're okay with me sending stuff to Billy or me going, no, what, this isn't really working for me, but it'd be okay if I got a bassist on this. They're like, fuck yeah. It's like, you're bringing people to this record that know what they're doing. To them, I'm adding more quality to their record. Now, again, there are many people that are superstars. Like, and I remember when I worked on a song with Dinky Bingham. Like, I've not spoke about this a lot, but there was an artist that was in a band in X Factor, and Dinky had heard one of the Unnaturally True, funnily enough, that Ed played drums on. And he heard it and he loved the music to it. He went,
It's a great song.
He's like, I love the musicality and what you did with all the chords and stuff.
Yeah.
And he's like, I've got this song that this artist, I'm not going to say the name, but he's like, he was signed to Atlantic at the time. And he's like, we're thinking this is going to be a single. And he just gave me the a cappella. And I had to write all the music to it. And I remember, done the guitar, and he went, know what, Paul, I'll do a bit of keys and I'll do a bit of bass. And honestly, man, see if you would have heard the keys, it was just like somebody that had played rhythm and blues all their life. The soul of it was just like effortlessness. The soul in it was just like effort. What's the word?
Effortless.
Fucking hell.
Unlike this podcast.
No. Yeah, fuck's sake. Thank God for editing. Fuck. Honestly, the soul that was in there was just effortless. It was just unbelievable. And I remember I sent it back to him and I was like, man, this is amazing to play with. And he's like, yeah, it's all right. And like, what I thought was like superb, he said to me, Paul, when other people would listen to that and be like, yeah, maybe you could change that, and that. He went, Paul, there's a level of musicianship, especially in the whole R&B side. Like a lot of these R&B producers, like some of the stuff they play, they just stick up a bass. Be like, and just like, oh wow, the feel, the groove, the playing, wow, like the intent, it's unbelievable. Like when I play bass like a guitarist. I play bass like a shit version of Paul McCartney, where I get really nice melodic bass lines, but there's not really much groove to it. You know what I mean? It's kind of like trying to stick to the timing. I can stick to the timing, I can get a good melodic bass line, but I don't have feel. You know what I mean? This is what many people like. I'll give bassists like a bit of a hard time, and they'll take a bit of a slagging. But oh man, see when you get a good bassist on a track, you'll appreciate it as a drummer head. Like, the difference a very, very, very highly skilled bassist, the quality that they can add, the groove that they can add to a track. I mean, what's it like for you as a drummer? For example, if you're playing on a song, for an artist, and the bassist that they've brought in isn't really up to scratch, does that make your job a lot more difficult?
Yeah, I mean, it's weird because I've had drum sessions on both ends of the recording chain where I've been told, and I always ask, what's the plan? Are you going to replace everything on the demo along to what I've played, or am I playing to you? Which is kind of code for, do I have to play out of time to make the drums fit with what you've done because it's not sticking to the click? I mean, I've had to have that conversation a few times, obviously diplomatically, but you have to ask that question and then go accordingly. And if you play with them, which is what they're used to hearing, they love it. But if you can then play something and bury a click and then they play over it, they love that as well. So it's a conversation you got to have. In terms of mixing, yeah, if I get a mix and the bass and drums aren't locking in, I find it really difficult. Mm-hmm. Really difficult. A, because I know I could have done a better job. B, because I mean, sometimes I'll edit stuff as well and they don't even notice. And they're like, oh, this sounds better. I mean, one guy asked me to do some mixing and I sent it back. I just said, look, I don't mean to be rude, but the mixing is not the problem here. The performances are, there's much to be desired on these. You need to tighten up the performance before I'd even consider sending this to mixing. And that was a diplomatic To be diplomatic, I mean, they didn't come back, obviously, but it was, there was no point me mixing it. There were far bigger problems with the project. But that's my ear as a musician, wanting the best for what I work on and wanting the best results for the client. And in that rare occasion, it was a case of, much like a good mastering engineer will listen to a mix and, on the one hand, they can be like, I can fix that, and then just squash loads of dynamic issues out of the way. Or they can go to the mix engineer and say, right, your low end's blowing the limiter out, and your snare drum's 60 dB too loud. Can we maybe tweak this and make it better for the overall result? It's having that awareness of all facets that can make things better. I mean, the classic I had with mixing was somebody sent me a track and they'd had another person do another track and another person do another track. And they said, oh, yeah, we really like the vocals that you did. And in my head, I was thinking, okay, besides EQ things, the only thing I did differently that the other two didn't do was tune the vocals. That's why it sounds better. Yeah. They don't know, but it just sounded better. And I was in my head thinking, I just tuned it. It's simple. But it's having that pitch, especially working with singers, it's having that pitch awareness. I am a harmonically challenged drummer, but I know, having recorded vocals and so much, I know when things are out of tune enough that you got to work on them.
Yeah, and I think, that is something that you can only learn by writing your own songs, performing, like singing yourself. It was funny, I was last night, I was on the laptop and I filmed in an old USB drive. I was like, oh my God, there's like old mixes from before, I think it was before uni. I think I'd just finished college, and I listened to the songs that I was going to release with my band, thinking I was a fucking mix engineer. Oh man, the mixes are the worst. I was like, oh my God, this is so bad. But also the timing is terrible, because I remember I was like Addictive Drummer or something I was using, and it's a crazy now. Especially what you've taught me and having to mix on so many records is understanding the importance of timing. So it's now, I listen to those and go, wow, everything's out of time. Even the guitars, because I wasn't playing to a click or something. I was like, I don't like playing to a click. It's annoying. It's taking me too long. Me thinking as a guitarist, I was like, just go with the flow, man. And then getting a drummer to play over it, and they're like, this is impossible to play over, man, because nothing's in time. And that's why everything's to a fucking rigid click now. And I try and get everybody to record to a click if I can, because having a solid tempo is important. But what that taught me was that you can be a musician, and again, when I'm on my game, I'm a good guitarist. When I'm practiced, I could do a lot of technical shit. Not like a fucking metal guitarist, but like blues rock and stuff, a lot of Clapton stuff I could do really well. But it shows you that even though I was in bands, and even though I was a decent guitarist, I didn't understand the element and the importance of timing. And it was only learning from Ed and, listening to a lot of mixes that maybe weren't perfectly in time. And I tuned and trained my ear to hear timing inaccuracies, where now it's a lot easier. Spike Stent talked about it in a lecture that I've talked about loads. And somebody sent a mix in and he mixed it quickly. And one of the main things that he said he did was, I genuinely spent most of my time fixing little timing irregularities. Because that's really the sound of a professional mix, is having everything perfectly timed, because a bit of timing irregularities can be something that puts a listener off. You're a drummer, Ed, you know better than me.
I mean, timing of the rhythm section and the low end are the fundamental foundations of the track. You can have the best sounding low end in the world, and if the bass and drummer are flamming, it's not going to sit right. The whole thing's going to sound imbalanced and stressed and unrelaxed. It's going to sound horrible. Just as, if you can have the best sounding rhythm section, but if you've got no low end or, completely washed out, blown out low end, the mix isn't going to sit right. And in both instances, the track isn't going to sit right. So to get all those ingredients right for everyone across the chain, from the songwriting to every performance, which, requires a lot of editing. Mixing does require some editing.
Yeah.
Producing should do all the editing, in my opinion, but it's not always the case. As we know, mastering, God, they should never be editing.
Yeah, I know, totally.
wouldn't surprise me. I mean, okay, even top and tailing the ends is technically editing. Mastering is going to do that, to be fair. to get every ingredient right all the way through, to get a really great sounding record, just requires so much skill on so many levels. Is what frustrates me about, the value and the state of the music industry at the moment, is what people take for granted on a device in their phone that they access for free. The amount of work that delivers that standard now is it's insane.
Yeah.
And it's such a shame it's undervalued. DistroKid hosts a range of visually engaging social media promotion tools to help your release stand out from the crowd. Creative and colourful social media cards incorporate your artwork to help your release stand out. These are free to download and can be highly effective promoting your release. DistroKid also offer mini videos, which are free, short, customizable videos incorporating your artwork and a short clip of your track. And if this wasn't enough, DistroKid also have a tool to create a Spotify canvas generator, which is the video that plays in the background when you're playing a song on Spotify. Simply choose a theme and choose from dozens of different creative artwork concepts. These are free to use and great for engaging your audience, available on DistroKid. For an additional subscription of $8.25 a month, you can get your music videos distributed to Apple Music, Vivo, and Tidal, and you'll keep 100% of your royalties. With DistroVid from DistroKid.
So I think probably, a good way to probably end it would be to kind of say, look, you want to be, a mix and mastering engineer, you want to be a producer, and you're musically challenged, or you're just not interested in picking up a musical instrument. What would you do, to make it, be a successful producer or a successful recording engineer? For me, I would say my advice would be, take, from my learnings, especially with drums, I didn't fully understand what a drum kit should sound like until I'd mixed a ton of records and made a shit ton of mistakes and had a drummer tell me, Paul, that's the wrong sample. Again, if we think about when I did Don't Stop, when we did it with Present Day Productions, remember, and I put the wrong snare in. I took a sample. Can't Stop, sorry, yeah. And I remember you said to me, Paul, that snare's not right. It's not even in the right pitch for the song. It's not in the right key for the song. It just doesn't work. And again, that was somebody showing their naivety. But making that mistake, I've never made that mistake again. And again, if I can use the original snare, I will use the original snare. And I'll listen to other songs. And if I'm stuck, I'll just go to Ed. You know what I mean? I'm not afraid to go to people who know better than I do and ask their second opinion. No, what I was thinking about, maybe like adding a sample in here. Do you think that would work? Ed would tell me in a heartbeat, he'd be like, nah, Paul, that's not going to work. They're not going to like it. Again, what was it I did wrong? Was it I added in a steel snare and you were like genre specific or whatever it was, you went, a steel snare does not work on this.
Hadn't you added in like a low thumpy country style wooden snare sound?
It was something like that.
Into a track that was recorded on a very shallow steel snare, and I knew it was a shallow.
That was it. It was something to do with steel, I remember.
Or brass or steel, yeah. And the guys were like, yeah, that's exactly what it was. It was a piccolo snare, and I was like, embrace it.
Yeah.
Might sound wrong to you, but that's had intention. But that can work the other way. I've recorded one of my own tracks, that's out with completely the wrong snare sound, and I then had a nightmare having to sample it later. Yeah, you got to be careful. I think what's helped me on one side of mixing is being a musician and having an awareness of feel and groove, as we've discussed on the podcast, and that's why I wanted to get some awareness of the other side of the mixing process and learn mastering, and that's had loads of benefits on mixing, I think. Just as I've always said, learn as many different angles and sides of what you're doing as you can. Yeah,
and don't be afraid to experiment and get people in. So for example, right, if I knew that I was then going to start, imagine I got a gig where I was like having to like record, a lot of string sections. I've never done a string section before and I couldn't even tell you really what like a violin should sound like. So what would I do? I would probably have to pay or, like try and get in my network and say, like, do you know any violin player? Do you know such and such? And, and I would try and do my best to get somebody in the studio. If I had to pay them, I'd have to pay them where, I'd say, look, I have one session with you and we're just going to try loads of different mic techniques and we'll listen to it back and you say to me, no, Paul, like we need to mic up here because it has to sound that way. This should sound this way and that way. And if I play it like that, it should sound like that and that. You can learn how things should sound So which means, if you want to record the perfect violin, you don't need to be a violin player, but it helps if you're going to be doing a lot of that to listen to a lot of violin players, and to take as much knowledge from violin players as you can, and try and, do a little bit of studying involved, where you could be in a place where a violinist comes up and you have a rough idea of this certain type of violin. I'm going to have to record this way because it's going to sound that way. What sound do you want? I want it to sound this way. Right, okay, I'll need that mic technique and that, and I'll have to mix it that, and that way. I think that's the great thing about music, is that there are so many different levels of musicianship. You have drummers, guitarists, bassists, people that play, different elements of strings and fucking different percussion. Even if you think about like just the people that, you think about big bands and stuff like that, just the guy that's like, what do they call that, Ed? The big thing. It's like the big drum. So I'm going to say a gong. It's not a gong. No, like when it's like, what's that called again?
Could be a gong drum, could be a timpani, could be.
Yeah, I think that, but there are people that genuinely is just their job is just to like fucking.
Oh, in an orchestra.
Yeah.
Or a marching band, yeah.
Yeah. There's so many instruments, right, that I've never even mixed, and I couldn't even, like, for example, I'm Scottish. Many people would sit there and say, yeah, Paul definitely knows how bagpipes should sound. I don't fucking know how bagpipes should sound like.
Is how a bagpipe should sound.
But if I had to record
if it sounds good, you've got it wrong.
But if I had to record one, like, again, I would need to sit and go on Spotify and listen to loads of bagpipes, and I'd need to go, right, that's what that sounds like. And then I'd need to study it, and I'd need to find somebody that was a bagpipe player and say, right.
I fucking love bagpipes. Like,
my mum
Scottish
loves them.
bagpipe rop is fucking brilliant.
I'm not the biggest
There's a
fan.
New Year's Eve gig that I do, and there's a bagpipe player who comes every year, and it's ballistically loud.
It's so
and
loud.
It's just dissonance. Everything's dissonant and it just pulls your ear. It's, if you've got synesthesia, it's probably the ultimate nightmare. But yeah, I enjoy it.
I think long story short, right, because I can never do a long story short, but I think what I'm trying to say in my hodgepodge way is that, yes, you don't need to actually play an instrument, but you do have to study it still if you want to do it right. If you want to get a good sound of a certain instrument, there has to be a level of studying. I've had to study drums. I've been studying drums for the past fucking 2 years. As much as I would...
And Paul hates it. That's how dedicated he is.
I know, and as much as I would sit there and say, I've not studied drums, I have studied drums. I've got a fucking drum kit in there. I've had to mic it. I've had to think about, right, okay, what kind of snare I'm going to get. I've had to think about the different hi-hats and shit. I'm like, why? In my head, I said to Ed, I was like, a hi-hat's a hi-hat. And he just was like, oh, here we go. But then again, I learned a valuable lesson about the different materials. As I said steel. I fucking know what they're made of. But I don't give a shit. but again, it was something. What was it you said? It's something like B, isn't it? You want to get a B20 or something like that for a hi-hat.
There's two alloys mainly used for cymbals, with exceptions, but usually it's a B8 or a B20, and that's the copper to tin ratio. And a B20 has a higher tin ratio with a trace of silver. They're the more expensive cymbals that usually sound the best and the most musical, and also the more durable. The B8 stuff tends to be thin and crack easily.
Yeah.
But it's just from a sound point of view. But then, a cymbal, like especially hi-hats and ride cymbals, they are as varied in tone and attack and sustain and definition as different types of acoustic guitars. And there's obviously...
Yeah.
I don't know. I'm going to show my ignorance. There's probably at least half a dozen different types of acoustic guitar, right?
There's
probably even 100.
Well, for example, right, so I've got like a dreadnought, which is the Epiphone that I use for strumming, but the guitar that gets used the most in here for a lot of the picking stuff and more delicate things, and again, I actually like to use it for strumming as well, if it's something that's tight. I've got a parlour guitar, I've got my Gretsch Penguin, and many people look at it and go, oh, it's quite a small guitar, but it records fucking beautifully, but it's not got that big, lush kind of ringing out sound that, a dreadnought would give you. And, there's different styles of guitars that have different sounds, and that's things that I know. So again, when I'm recording a guitar, I can layer them. I know, right, okay, I'm going to use that sound for that, and I'm going to use that sound for that, and this is how they're going to complement each other. Same with the guitars. I've got a Les Paul, so again, I've got certain types of humbuckers in there, because I'm a fucking geek, and I've spec'd it out. I know, fucking meow. But again, I've got that. I've got the two Gretches, and many people would look at that Gretsch there and the red Gretsch, and they'd go, yeah, they're just two Gretches. No, like, there's different pickups.
Have you got a flying V?
Oh, fuck that.
You're not a musician unless you got a flying V.
Fucking flying V. Goes up to 11.
I'm joking.
But at the end of the day, all I was trying to say was that I understand the sound of everything. If I want to get a certain type of guitar sound, I've got a humbucking guitar with a Les Paul. I've got a different style of humbucking guitar with the white Gretsch behind me because it's got the Filtertrons in there. And then I've got the de-Armand single coil pickups, which again have got their own sound, and then you can get a Tele and you can get a Strat, and they all have these different tonal characteristics, and you just know when to pull them out. You know what I mean? And that's just experience.
I mean, I've got a vague awareness of that just from hanging out with musicians for 30 years. You pick up things, but again, what I do on my recordings that I do produce is get the guys who are experts in all that to choose what they want to play and what they think is right. And I get musicians far better than me to play on my stuff because there's no point me trying to play piano on my stuff when I can get Jez Davies to play on it. He's fucking unreal. I think as well, if we're learning from our mistakes all the way, I had an experience on a gig. I did sound for Lang Lang and Jules Holland the other night.
Oh, right, okay.
And I'd done one of Lang Lang's foundation things before with the grand piano. That. And I'd recorded it and I'd not quite got the piano sound right, and I was like, why is this? So I went away and thought about it, and I was a bit embarrassed to admit to the guys who'd hired me that I wasn't happy with the piano sounds. I was like, yeah, it's fine, and knowing that I had to go back and do it again, and then went back, and the guy came in to tune the piano. When you move a piano, obviously it needs retuning, and I was wandering around, I was sticking my head in different positions, putting my ear in and pulling my ear out, and literally climbing inside this grand piano at different points. And they walking around him, leaning into where he was sat playing, and he just turned around and said, "Can I help you? What are you doing?" And I said, "Oh, I'm just listening, for where to mic it up." And then I mic'd it up based on that and what I'd learned on the last gig. And both Lang Lang and Jules said that it sounded amazing, and I was like, "Job done, lesson learned."
Yeah,
paid for itself. Anyway, I'm going to stop wanking myself off, and we should end the podcast there.
Yeah.
But yeah, we've waffled. Thanks if you've stuck with us. Leave your thoughts and comments below. But ultimately, I feel like your musical journey as a producer or mix engineer will be significantly richer if you have an understanding and awareness and a knowledge and an ability on the instruments. And personally, playing an instrument has always been one of the most rewarding things I've ever done, albeit also one of the most infuriatingly fucking stressful things I've ever done. But
Agreed.
That only kicks in when you take it seriously.
I know. Yeah, so you don't need to be a musician.
Much like mixing.
Yeah, very.
Mixing's fun until you want to take it professionally. And then you have to digress. Like I listened to mixes I did 5 years ago before we started doing this, taking it seriously. Some of them are really good.
Mine's are
before
shit,
I knew anything.
Mine's are shit. Like, I don't know what
the ones from 6 years ago, they were shit, yeah.
Yeah, they're bad.
You know what we should do? We should produce a song. We've talked about it.
Yeah, we'll have actually.
But we should do something. Well, I mean, I'll at least record the drums. You can do the rest. I couldn't give a shit.
Great, yeah. Right, okay, on that bombshell, yeah, we'll leave it there. The thought of adding another production to my fucking workload, the fear's getting me already. So yeah, that might happen one day. But yeah, look, at the end of the day, right, having a musical journey does help. But if you don't, just make sure that you study and make sure that you do at least surround yourself with, talented musicians who can teach you parts of their journey. Okay, I think that's the best way to end it. So, my name is Paul Third. That said, Thorne. And we will see you again next week on the Working Audio Tools podcast.
Goodbye.